Hello, my name is Jessica Hanley, and I'm an athletic training student at Florida Gulf Coast University. My concussion case study today is on a collegiate men's soccer player who we helped go through the return to play and return to academics, protocols, and recover as quickly as possible. Okay, so to give a little bit of background of the situation, our patient is a sophomore on the men's soccer team here at FGCU. He's 20 years old and has had 2 previous concussions leading up to this point. As he plays as a midfielder, he was taking the ball down the field toward the opposing goal and looking down at the ground when 2 of the opposing players, who happen to be quite significantly taller than he is, both impacted his skull and sent him toward the ground. They hit him right at the edge of his forehead and his hairline, and he went down onto his knees. He immediately popped back up. We didn't see him fall completely on the ground. No yelling, no grabbing at his head, nothing. He just popped right back up and kept running. And through that whole entire practice, he seemed fine. Didn't say anything to anyone. He lives with other members of his team, and they said there was nothing different about him. But the following day at practice, he did seem out of sorts, meaning just more frustrated and angry than usual. He was heard yelling across the field a couple of times, but played fine, honestly, with the same intensity and strength. But after practice that day, he came up to my preceptor and I and said that he felt completely out of sorts, was headachy, just tired and dizzy, and couldn't concentrate, and every sort of concussion effect that you can feel, he seemed to be feeling it, and said it was getting more and more severe. And we immediately pulled him aside and gave him the scat form and some other cranial nerve assessment tests, and we at that point determined that he had a concussion and pulled him from any further play or practice or weights that day. Moving on to the patient's SOAP note, since so much of the subjective category has already been covered in the abstract, I'm going to move on to the objective category. We took the patient from the field inside and were able to give him a much more thorough inspection and physical to see all of the symptoms and anything else that we might have missed on the field. Visually, he looked physically fine, so there wasn't any major bruising, there was no swelling, no disfigurations or anything that seemed out of sorts in the normal way, but his person, you could tell he was different. He's a kind of guy who smiles all the time, is very upbeat and positive, and his demeanor was mad, it was upset, it was stressed out. He'd snap at the smallest things and say he didn't want to do things. He was holding his shoulders kind of taut and upright, and when we asked, a lot of the guys have sore necks in soccer, but when we asked, he's like, yeah, no, it's from that point, that impact, that his neck got very sore in the back, right at the base, and also a little bit of point tenderness around the forehead where the actual impact occurred. He is able to move around and walk fine, but he says he feels very tired, just can't concentrate, he can't think straight, his mind is all over the place and stressed out, and he just can't get anything together. Basically, light and noise isn't too big of a problem, a little bit sensitive. He just had a lot of mental fogginess and difficulty in concentrating and remembering what was happening. Not in remembering what happened to him, but just throughout the day. The day before, he had tried to go to class and said he really struggled with trying to hear what the teacher was saying and trying to hear around what all of his classmates were saying. So he has a concussion. While still in the training room that first day, We had him, after a physical inspection, come and sit down and retake the online impact test, which he already had a baseline for. Everything showed a support of what we had said with his concussion. He reported all the symptoms to be much more than his baseline. He wasn't able to remember the pictures or the words or anything quite as well, and was really struggling with even finishing the test, and said it honestly made his headache worse. But we wanted to see where he was at so that we could move on from that point. So, having said that, moving on to the last section of our SOAP note, we started setting some goals for him. From that first day on, he needed 3 days of complete and total rest. No activity, no school, nothing that was going to harm him even more, like mentally or physically. So we had him kind of stay in his room and had his teammates check up on him a lot. We had him come into the training room once or twice a day at least, and he could rest in there with a towel over his face, get some heat pads on, some massage, ways to help him relax and really just unwind and let his body heal, and especially the tight shoulders and tight neck. Our next goal, have symptoms amount and severity decrease each day. So in the checklist we have, we wanted to see it decrease, and if it was increasing, then we would have had him seen the doctor, but it really was not the case with him, thank God. Each day he had a significant decrease in symptoms reported and their severity, so that goal was very much reached. Third, have athletes symptom-free within 5 to 8 days to begin his return to play protocol. That did occur, at least from what he reported to us. Around day 6, he said he was symptom-free, and we started the return to play very slowly, very lightly, but that goal was reached as well. Long-term return to academics begins after the 3-day rest. This he did do, but struggled with a little bit. He went straight back, did have some symptoms to class, and had to kind of sit in the back and sit quietly and not stay on campus too long, but he did succeed in this. He began his return to play protocol within the 5 days, yes, and did, and increased each day with what he could do without more symptoms, at least from what he reported to us, but everything seemed well, and he seemed very strong. His attitude improved significantly throughout all this. Lastly, have athlete be fully returned to play within a 14-day span through continued treatment and monitoring. This also did work out. We had him playing full contact practice within those 14 days. I think it was right at the 14 or 13-day mark, and we monitored him every day. We monitored him during practice and after, and we asked his coach what he thought and everything else. And yeah, so this was a pretty straightforward, successful return to play for this athlete. When it comes to the specific clinical trajectories that we worked on with this soccer player, the most significant was his anxiety and his mood. From being the most upbeat, sunshining man who comes in at 7 in the morning, just ready for practice and asking how we are, to being sullen and quiet and snapping and mad and completely negative in every way. Like, that was the most drastic change that I saw. And he said that it affected how much he could concentrate, and it affected how much mental fog he had. Like, all he could think was the negativity and the stress and what was wrong and how he just felt bad for himself. And so that was the biggest thing that we had to work on, meaning just constantly encouraging him, having teachers like on board with us to help him get things done, just make things kind of as streamlined and easy as possible so that he wouldn't have to stress anymore and worry. Cognitive, he had a very large problem with concentration. He said everything distracted him, from light to noise to simply not being able to read for long periods of time and not being able to listen to a teacher for long periods of time. His mind would just wander. His head would start to hurt. He couldn't take on too many tasks at one time, so the cognitive aspect was definitely there and a struggle. We helped him with projects and with his quiz that he had to make up by simply working with the teachers, working with him, like making things. We'd help him out a little bit if we could, but just having his teammates, especially that live with him, help him out, make sure he was getting things done, not like cheating, but just making things easier so he wouldn't have to read so much or stare at a monitor for too long and hurt his eyes and his head even more. As well as the fatigue that he would have to fight and resting. So he had, instead of practice, he'd rest, honestly, and sit with us or go home and rest. His coach would just tell him, like, why are you here? Go sleep and go get better, which was a blessing that the coach worked with us so much. And the last one being post-traumatic migraines. So he did have slight bit of nausea right at the beginning, but it mostly included headaches and sensitivity to light and noise throughout his couple of days with these side effects and symptoms. So that was not nearly as significant, but was definitely present and was the first to go. And yeah, these are the things that we had to work through specifically with this athlete. Most important part here for the clinical trajectories is the accommodations we made to help them. So I've covered a lot of the return to academics. He had a full 3 days off from classes, was helped by his teammates and us and the athletic tutoring that we have here at FGCU to help get things through. All letters were sent to his teachers excusing him from things and asking for extra time. He returned very slowly with the amount that he could read, the amount of time he could spend in class or with like the tutors each day, and also would take as much as he could that wasn't staring at a screen. So books when he could, just having some other student or teacher or tutor like speak to him or read through things for him so that he could do it out loud. Just for a couple of days. His symptoms got better pretty quickly with when it comes to the headaches and sensitivity to reading and light and noise. So that was just for a day or two, and he got back on track very quickly. He's a good student. Return to play was somewhat more strenuous and a process. He had the 3 days of complete rest, same as with academics, with us checking his symptoms daily. By day 4, he said he had barely had any symptoms left, and 5, he said he was symptom-free, so we began the return to play protocol. First day was just very light biking. We wanted to see him like barely sweat and just do anything and see if it caused the symptoms to come back, and it didn't. So day 2 was moderate activity and light working out. So he biked for 25 minutes, worked up a little bit of a sweat. We did some intervals, just like a little bit up, a little bit down, and then some bodyweight exercises of squats and lunges. He did a little bit of arm stuff like push-ups and some crunches and ab things. Moving on from then, he would do all this on the sideline with us. We drag the bike out there onto the field. And then the third day, strenuous aerobic activity and moderate resistance training. So this day, he was able to go, we said whatever you want, basically, for 25 minutes. And he really did take that to heart and tried. Forgive me, 40 minutes on the bike. And this day we had him do some things with bands as well as some light weights that we borrowed from the strength coach. He biked for 40 minutes, sweat and sweat and sweat outside, and then did a lot of the squats and lunges and other things, resisted, some bridging. We had him do just a lot of core exercises as well as arm stuff that he could do on the field, and helped out as he could, like walking around and getting balls and stuff, just to be more active. The next day, we moved on to a full training day, only non-contact. So he could do whatever he wanted with sport-related drills, so he could use the balls and kick things around, do some of the running drills with the team, all their warm-up stuff. Just it couldn't be contact, so during the scrimmage part of practice, he couldn't participate and would come over to us. And he could do whatever weightlifting and as heavy as he wanted. So that was a blessing that he got to go back into the gym and enjoy that. From there, he just continued with the next day being a full-on contact practice, and you have to have at least one of those, probably 2, before you're allowed to be in a competition or game. And he completed, I believe, 3 days of full-on practice and contact before he got back into a game. He's one of our better players. And so the coach was very happy to have him back and be able to play. And he took it easy. He didn't let him play for like a whole game, or I don't think even half the game, but he still got him in there and was able to play and help the team out. So that was a blessing to see. So these are the patient's impact clinical report from his baseline to the day that he came in and retook the test when he reported his concussion. He took the test, and the most significant changes were in the memory composite for verbal, memory composite for visual, as well as his total symptom score. So these were the ones that changed the most. Symptom score from 1 to 27, memory from 97 to 84, and memory composite visual 91 to 78. His visual motor speed didn't change too much. Reactions actually improved slightly. And so the thing that he really struggled with was the memory and focus and like trying to catch those things. So that is what was noteworthy here. Again, looking at these last 3 pages of the clinical report, the first left-hand corner near the top page is the most significant one, I think, of the whole packet, just in that it is recording how much he's rating on a 1 to 6 scale his symptoms from concussion, and they were quite noteworthy, with many 4s in the mental fogginess and focus and concentration, as well as irritability and like just anger and anything that had to do with emotion and concentration he struggled with drastically. And it plays out into the scores and charts on the right hand side. That's where that concentration, mental fogginess, goes into how well he was able to remember the shapes and the colors, the words, and